I think we have been very relaxed about it. There's a lot of venues that aren't doing the right thing. I see it day in and day out. Cafes that I've seen really just jamming them in, and especially in areas where we've had some clusters. It just seems like they're not paying attention, which is disappointing.
I'm Dani Valent, and this is Dirty Linen, the podcast that takes the issues the hospitality industry finds hard to air in public and shakes them all about. On Dirty Linen this week, we're talking about temporary visa holders in hospitality. We've heard from people who are at the front line. They're on temporary visas themselves. And I wanted to talk to a restaurateur who's really passionate about this issue. So I've hit up Attila Yilmaz from Pazar Food Collective in Sydney. Attila, we're Facebook mates. I don't think we've ever actually been in a room together, although I hope when we are in a room together, it's because I'm eating your food. But I know just from chatting to you and listening to what you were saying on Deep in the Weeds, my brother podcast, that you employ a lot of temporary visa holders, and you've got a lot to say about the way that the industry works in and around them.
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Dani. And I also hope that when we do meet, it's in a dining room of some sort. Whether it's mine or another.
I know.
I don't care. But yeah. I feel like I know you really well because I follow you religiously, and I've been listening to the podcast, and I've been following your campaign through social media and in the papers as well. And look, hats off to you. Thank you so much for what you're trying to do for all the visa holders and the restaurant owners and hospitality people who really depend on these people for our livelihoods.
Yeah, I mean, no worries. And the reason, it's a social justice issue for one, but I also love restaurants so much and want to go back to them so badly that it seems there's a really clear connection between my passion for restaurants and my work for temporary visa holders, because we just need them to run our Australian restaurants, don't we?
Well, we do. And I think Australians in general love restaurants. I mean, just look at us when we came out of lockdown. It went bananas. Like, people just could not wait to get into their local favourite and get out and dine again. The general feedback was, your takeaway was great, but it's so good to be back in the dining room. And that's what restaurants they're about. And people, you hear it time and time over and over again with your guest speakers on your podcast. It's about the experience. It's everything encompassed. It's not just about the food. But yet these temporary visa holders are the lifeblood of our industry. And without them, we wouldn't have the industry that we have. We would not have the business we have. I would not have my restaurant. I would not have a livelihood. I would not be able to provide for my family. And I would not have been able to do the things I've been able to do in the last 6 years I've been in this industry. And I haven't been in it very long. This is my second, third, fourth vocation, wherever it is in my lifetime. But I'm definitely passionate about it. But I'm also passionate about the people that work for me or work with me.
Tell me why that is. Like, why do you depend on these guys so much?
To be honest, it's not for lack of trying to hire locals. And when we do advertise, and I do try to recruit, I'll just come out and say it. The industry is pretty pretentious. It really is. And we just lack a lot of industry professionals. And understandably, the industry professionals are going to gravitate more to the city-bound diners, the eastern suburbs here in Sydney, kind of your more popular, your more trendy places. We're in Canterbury. We're on the fringes of the inner west. We're a 12-minute drive from the city. It's not that far away.
It's not the outback.
No, it's not. But when I approach people in industry, when I've been to industry events before, they go, "Oh yeah, Pazar, I've heard of that. Where's that again? Oh, Canterbury." Oh. And they're turning their back and walking away from me. Oh. It's like. I swear it's happened. And I'm like, what the fuck? Your restaurant just went bust a few weeks ago and you're walking away from me? Like, so there's this pretentiousness in the industry, and it's really hard to get people to come out and work in the city, in the fringes and in the suburbs. I guess there's this stigma that we're just not considered legit. I've spoken to chefs that I've said to them, "Why don't you open a restaurant in the suburbs? Like, we're thriving. We're doing." Oh no, I really want to open in the city. I really, just don't feel like you've made it until you're in the city. But yeah, I mean, the only people that are applying for these jobs in general are foreign workers. Those are our students, our visa holders.
As you said, you ran an ad not so long ago. 200 people applied, and not one was an Australian. Am I remembering that right?
430 was the last count. So yeah, when I put that last post up, so at last count it was 430. I think in there were 4 Australians or permanent residents that I filtered through. That didn't have the relevant experience, but generally most of them were our visa holders and students or travellers.
That is unbelievable. It's not as but then there's problems with employing international students, aren't there? Like you can't. I mean, because of their work restrictions, you don't want to staff your restaurant just with international students, right?
Well, no. Well, it's not. Well, you can't if you're doing things legit. And let's be honest. A lot of these internationals that have been working, they can only work 20 hours. No one can survive on 20 hours a week work in this country. And maybe it's not spoken of, but a lot of these kids that are out here studying, they're working 20 hours on the books and they're working 20 hours off the books somewhere else. And that's just the reality of the situation. But the problem is now that also is cash has dried up. We're virtually a cashless economy. I'm down to, I think, 6 to 8% cash transactions in a week now. Whereas 2 years ago, we would have been sitting around 45, almost 50% cash coming through the business. Now, I've spoken to a lot of these students. A lot of my guys that have been working for me, they've been able to do the 40 hours during the pandemic. But now we're at a situation where I've got to cut them back because we do everything legit. Everything's on the books, everything's taxed, they're paid above award, super, everything. We do everything right. And it's just too high risk now to then go, right, yeah, we can put you 20 hours on the books and then, we'll pay you cash for the other 20 hours, which is, to be honest, is when they get rorted as well from a lot of businesses because they take advantage of that.
Yeah, and they don't get the correct hourly rate. And
No, I've had guys come work for me. They've been washing dishes for $12 an hour, or waiting tables for $13, $14 an hour working, and it's just that, that's just a cruel amount of money to pay. And that actually really makes me angry. And I've managed actually with a couple of those that were getting scammed to bring them on and give them more hours and pay them a better wage. So, whereas they were working 2 jobs to make the one amount, they're working 20 hours and getting the same amount of money. So,
as a business owner, what are the challenges when you can only, if you're doing everything legit and you're only able to employ an international student for 20 hours a week or 40 hours a fortnight is what they're technically allowed to work. So what are some of the challenges that throws up for your business in terms of continuity and training?
Well, it's expensive to train people because time is money. Not only that, you've got so many more people on the payroll, so much more to process, so many more personalities to deal with, so many more issues to deal with. And, I'm a one-man operation. I can't speak for the larger restaurant groups, and we're a fairly busy restaurant, but I do everything from running the pass, reservations, accounts, maintenance, you name it. I'm across everything. I'm even hosting while I'm running the pass.
Wow.
At the moment, because I can't find a restaurant manager. And this hasn't been just during this pandemic. It's been for a while. But what it means to me is that I've got to increase my team and the numbers in my team, which means I've got to spend more time training people. But also then trying to retain those people is really, really difficult because, at 20 hours a week, and especially when you hit something like a pandemic, as soon as your hours start to drop off or your clientele starts to drop off, you need to start dropping team members, and you can lose them fairly quickly. And that's been a huge issue, is retention. Retaining these guys, especially in the lean periods, it's really, really hard.
You talk about the pretentiousness that you point to, where there's this, bias towards the inner city. But do you think, you'd also, there are Australian kids living in Canterbury. Like, why do you think they aren't applying for part-time jobs with you?
You know what? I've been at that location now in Canterbury for almost 7 years. It started as a food truck pop-up and then it evolved into a restaurant. The first team I had there with Pazar, I had the same solid team for about almost 3.5 to 4 years. And there were a lot of local kids that were either customers that would come in with their parents and applied as 16, 17-year-olds and then worked on for 3-4 years. And the original team. And, it comes a time where everyone needs to move on. And I was quite frank with a lot of these kids. If you're here after 3 or 4 years, there's serious issues with what you're studying. You need to, have a good hard look at yourself and move on and do something else, because it's too long to be in one spot, or you won't grow. But the last 2 years have just been and it's not just me. It's just been a battle to recruit and to get quality hospitality staff, like people who want to do it for a living. They want this to be their career. They want it to be their livelihood. And we do have a lot of locals around the area. I'm a local. I live locally. My kids go to the local school. I know of a lot of local kids in the area, but they all want to work for the big names. They all want to work for the Merivales. They want to all go work in the city. They, at the trendy spots. And they attract that group of people. And they hoover them all up. It's really hard to compete. It's all about the gram now, isn't it? Where you work, who you work for, where you're being seen, who you're hanging out with. So it's the general consensus. And I've asked some kids in the area too. They'll catch trains, buses, whatever it is, to get into the city to go and work for less than I'll pay an hour, just because it's trendy.
I think that's odd. We spoke to a French restaurant manager, Clément Desmarais, on the podcast this week as well, and he spoke about a very different culture of hospitality that he sees in Europe, where it's a legitimate career. It's something that everyone would be proud of their son or daughter who is going into a professional hospitality life. Do you think Australia is a little bit different in that regard?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I remember a time when it was. I'm 46 years old, but I do remember when, if you worked in a restaurant and you were a waiter, for example, Melbourne's Lygon Street in the days when it was just pumping, Norton Street, Leichhardt here in Sydney, where people were professional wait staff, and they were proud to say, and they were proud to do that job. It wasn't an in-between job. Here, hospitality is something that you do, especially front of house, is something you do in between jobs or on your way to doing something else. People aren't proud to say that they're a server, they're a waiter, they're that they work in a restaurant. It's like, I'm just working in a restaurant at the moment, and before I do this, it's definitely culturally different. It's I don't know. There's been a big shift I've seen in the last probably 3-4 years in the attitudes of I think of the younger generation coming through as well, as to what they should and shouldn't be doing, or what they. There's a lot of self-entitlement. Let me put it that way, and I saw that a lot in the police too. Don't get me wrong. I was in the police for 12 years, and one of my major jobs there was as a field training officer, training the new recruits out of the academy. And over those 12 years, I saw the calibre and the quality of police and attitudes changing, and most didn't last. it was time for them to move on. But there's a very much that's not my job. I'm not paid to do that kind of mentality, which comes across a lot, especially with some of the newer ones that we do meet. It's, I'm a waiter. I'm not a, you ask them to wash some glasses and, the comeback will be, no, I'm a waiter. I'm not a glass washer. Well, it's like, it's all part of the job. It's, little things like that.
I mean, you really have chosen hospitality. You mentioned that you were in the police force. Can you just give us the little potted history of Attila's journey?
Hospitality is in my blood. My dad came to this country, the same old story, virtually nothing in his pocket, self-taught cook, opened up coffee lounges, and then in the end, coffee lounge, and in the end up in the restaurant game. And that was in my blood from a very young age. And for me, cooking and making people happy, and it was just something I grew up with and I loved. And as a 24-year-old, when I joined the police, I continued to cook and learn, and I'm self-taught, just travel. I'd take annual leave. I'd go work in a restaurant as a kitchen hand and just, pick up little bits and pieces, whether it be a Pakistani restaurant, Italian restaurant, whatever it was, and travel. So, 12 years in the police, the glass got a little bit too full, as I like to say, and it started to spill over. And it was time for me to go. But I also, when I left with a conscious decision of kind of where I knew I would go and what I wanted to do. I never thought I'd end up back in owning a restaurant. That wasn't my goal. My goal was just to own a food truck and, go and activate spaces that people feel like they can't go to or feel unsafe being in at night time. And, it just evolved into what it is today.
So it was about creating community spaces. I suppose it's so much of, there's I guess the law enforcement side of policing, and there's also the community engagement, community building, connection creating side of policing.
Yeah, 100%. I was very much from the old school. Where I was very much the sort of person that got out of the police car and walked around and met the local stakeholders, the shop keepers, the shop owners, because they provided us with the intelligence and building trust with them was like the old school days of the police. You got to know your local policeman, and the more you got to know them, the more you trusted them, and the more information and the more you could rely on those people. And for me, I wanted to still give back in some sort of way. If I couldn't be a policeman anymore, but what else could I do? Could I provide a blanket of safety in the middle of the night, providing awesome food and a great atmosphere in a space, that ordinarily people would avoid. So that was kind of my motivation behind it, and here I am today.
And do you feel like Pazar plays that role in Canterbury? Is it a gathering place, or in normal times at least?
Yeah, I mean, when I decided to open in Canterbury, everyone said, Yilmaz, he's lost it. He's absolutely lost the plot. Like, and I used to joke, I'm crazy, I've certificate to prove it, but it was, Canterbury was a wasteland. It's just a strip of vacant for lease storefronts. There's really not much going on around there. And, when I did it, it was just meant to be a pop-up and a test out for whether people would travel to my food truck to eat my food before I even had a food truck. And, we blacked out the windows and just promoted it on social media, and lo and behold, people were coming from all over Sydney. And it just gained a bit of a cult following from there. And 80% of my business travels to the area, travels to Canterbury to eat. And most of my customers come from the eastern suburbs, North Shore and the south. 20% of my business is local.
Well, there you go. They're not the pretentious ones. People are taking that massive odyssey, 12 minutes from the city to because they love what you're doing.
To be honest, if I had $1 for every time someone said, why don't you open up in the eastern suburbs, or we should come over to the eastern suburbs, I'd be a very rich man. I mean, I've been blessed that we've had a really good team. I mean, we've had people from Melbourne coming in, walking to the restaurant with their carry-on, specifically flying up for the overnight to eat, stay at a hotel and fly back the next day. which is humbling and it's nice and kind of weird all at the same time. So it's yeah, and it's a wonderful feeling. But the last 18 months has been a slog. It's been tough, and I think that's everyone in the industry. We're really, really feeling it.
It already was a hard slog, and now we're in a pandemic, and now Sydney seems to be in, I don't know, poised on a precipice. What's this past week been like to be a restaurateur in Sydney?
Oh, wow, Dani. Seriously, I think I'm spending probably 70% of my time listening to the news, waiting to hear of the latest cluster, which restaurants being shut down, which areas being affected. Speaking on the socials with other restaurant owners and stuff, the last week and a half especially, we've taken a huge hit here. I lost 60% of my reservations within 3 days of the clusters, starting to grow last week. We were takeaways dropped 90%. I think this time around, to be honest, the pandemic hasn't worried me so much. Not having the clientele hasn't worried me. My biggest stress has been staff and staffing issues and being able to staff the restaurant properly, and to also to provide for them as well. But this time round with this lockdown, which I've kind of been prepared for, if we do get locked down, it feels worse. And, looking at what happened in Melbourne, when you start to shut down suburban areas and targeting certain suburbs and naming localities, it immediately, for me, is a bit of a death sentence as far as business is concerned, because 80% of my business travels to where I am. And if my area is named as a cluster, then they're not coming. They won't be coming for takeaway, and they won't be coming to dine in. So that's worrying me a little bit. Looking at our reservations are cancelling at the moment more than being replaced with bookings, which has never happened. So, yeah, it is worrying because we don't have JobKeeper. We don't have any rental assistance as such as yet. I'm pretty proud to say I've managed to keep it profit, at least break even after the first 2-3 weeks, and then run at a small profit. But that's not including what we owe to the tax department later on. But it's worrying. It is.
It's definitely feels different, this time around. Obviously in Melbourne, we're in the thick of it and we're all wearing masks, and there's no way that you can go around anywhere and not know that life is completely changed. It's amazing the difference it makes when you see everyone in a mask. There's no getting around it. There's no forgetting it, which is good, I think. But, from conversations that I've had with people in Sydney and elsewhere in the country, but particularly Sydney, there has been, I feel like I've heard about a sense of a bit of that, I don't know, untouchability. It's not going to happen to me. This is somebody else's problem. We've dealt with it. We've done it. And I guess also from customers, just as you said, everyone was so excited to get back into restaurants. Perhaps they were a bit overexcited.
New South Wales and Sydney especially, they need to wake up. As much as I love having the people back in the restaurant, we've had some tables in that have just been an absolute nightmare for us. Which just sends your anxiety levels and your stress levels through the roof when you look across the room and they're hugging and they're kissing. But it's not so much that, it's the conversations that you hear. Oh my God, I haven't seen you in so long, and what have you been up to? It's been months, and so forth, so on and so forth. In my head, one, you haven't spoken to the person for ages, right? So health-wise, you don't know how they're tracking. Two, you haven't seen them in ages, and yet you're still willing to throw yourself at them and hug and kiss, and it just starts to make you nervous. But it's not just me. I look across the dining room, and I'm a pretty observant guy. I pick up on body language really quickly, and you see other diners kind of in shock, and you can see them get a little bit tense by that sort of behaviour as well. But I think we have been very relaxed about it. There's a lot of venues that aren't doing the right thing. I see it day in and day out. Cafes that I've seen really just jamming them in, and especially in areas where we've had some clusters. I've driven through, and it just seems like they're not paying attention, which is disappointing. And we're doing everything legit, and I know that many restaurants are, and keeping a strict log, sanitizers everywhere, doing everything by the letter of the law to keep everybody safe. Because to be honest, a 14-day lockdown and a deep clean will hurt me more than a government sanctioned lockdown for 6 weeks. Because at least you can do takeaway, when you're locked down. At least you can try and generate some other income. But when you're locked down completely and you're named in the media, that's my fear as well, because they're really going to town on some of these restaurants and really repeating the name of that restaurant over and over and over again. And I see it very hard for that brand, especially, to recover from that, which is a bit sad.
Yeah, I mean, that's a restaurateur's worst nightmare, right? To be, the such and such cluster. It's, absolutely. I mean, you hope that people will understand that, it's not the business. It doesn't define the business. You hope it won't define a business. But of course, you definitely don't want to be the person that has to find out the hard way. And I guess, as well, for you in your situation where you don't have staff on JobKeeper, you've got that a workforce that's likely to just find the next job. So and you've also got a very difficult rebuild if you are forced to lock down hard.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Very much. I mean, if I was to lose 2 of my key staff now, I'm done. Really am. And that's how dependent I am on the people that work with me. It's funny. I was thinking about the sort of person I was in the police, and when you ran a briefing at the beginning of a shift, our briefings used to be kind of more relaxed and a bit, about fun and about what's going to happen tonight and what's on the menu, and just general chit chat and a bit of a joke. The last couple of months now, it's really become like a police military briefing at the beginning. Everyone's signing the register, everyone checking in, making sure everyone's well, making sure they understand our COVID safe plan, and just repeating it over and over and over again. And I feel that hat back on again now, especially during service too, that the way I used to scan a room is different now to the way it used to be. I'm very suspicious and very cautious of everybody who walks through that door. And I hate it. I hate that feeling. It doesn't feel right.
It's so interesting because, as all these regulations have come out about how to be COVID safe, and this idea that, you need to control your customers in a very different way. A lot of restaurateurs have said, oh, goodness me, like, we're not the police. We don't know how to, we don't know how to do this, whether it's a regional business that now is asked to collect postcodes and all that sort of stuff to check that no one's from Melbourne. There's just a lot of extra layers of enforcement. But you actually were the police, so and it's a funny way that your skills have come back into play. It must feel really, really weird.
And it does, and it's not, and it's not in a good way either. But I mean, I'm just extra cautious. I just really am. I've got a duty of care, and that duty of care extends not only to my staff and my family, but it extends to every person who walks through that door. I got into an argument with a gentleman the other night who wanted to come in and order some takeaway. I've just put a blanket strict rule down. We don't let anyone through that door unless we know exactly who they are. We have a contact number for them, and that's it. That's the rule. And this gentleman just refused to give a name and a number. He just wanted to order some takeaway and go. And I said, I'm doing this for your... He just would not understand that this is as much for you as it is for me. Because you've come in here, and if we do have an infection in here tonight and you've been here, I want to be able to contact you. He just could not get that into his head. And for that reason, I said, go elsewhere. You need to go elsewhere. We're not letting you in. That's simple as that. But with our takeout, we're doing everything online. That way, at least we have a real person, a real phone number, a real credit card linked to that, and that gives us a trace. All our diners, before they arrive, are required to text us the first name and mobile number of every guest on their list that is attending that night. So all we do is check them off the guest list when they walk through the door. So the experience when you arrive at Pazar is very much like you would have go and dine at a restaurant in the old days. You just go, sit down, enjoy your meal. So we're not asking for people to check in when they get there. We check them in before.
Oh, the old days. They were nice, weren't they?
Oh, the good old days.
So, Attila, I just thinking again to your role as a builder of community, and I guess a lot of what police officers do is to look at different sectors of the community that are doing it tough and to try to create connections and meaningful pathways for people. And I know that you do that as an employer, and as a restaurateur, you create that sense of community. Obviously, community is very stretched, very different, and things are not going to be easy for so many people for some years as we counter the economic impacts of the pandemic, let alone the health impacts. What can you see happening to communities in your area and I guess throughout our society? What are some of the fault lines that you can see, and what are some of the ways that we can all help one another to create a better society on the other side of this?
Wow, that's a really tough question to answer. Look, I mean, I can only go for my own observations of what I see around our area. And we, where we are in Canterbury is made up of some very diverse, different cultural backgrounds. We have a huge Chinese community, Korean community. We have a massive Lebanese, Greek. I do see them as quite insular. They do very much stick to themselves, and so I do fear that we aren't building communities like we used to. I don't see the integration and the mixing as much anymore, especially now with this pandemic. There are certain shopping districts and areas where there's a lot of Chinese, for example, shops in one area, and then a lot of Korean shops in one area. And you used to see a mix of all kind of races. And what I'm seeing now as I drive around, I just can't. I'm very much a voyeur. I used to say in the police, I'm a professional voyeur. That's what I do. And I see that mix less and less at the moment. And I think people are just maybe withdrawing and sticking, to their own. I don't look at people that way. I look at us as all Australians and all as one community, and all having to work together and support each other. And that's what I fear, that if we do start to withdraw into our own ethnicities and areas and support only those, then I fear we'll get too much division. How do we bring people together again? And I think it's over food. I really do. I think I'm seeing that more now because the restaurants have been shut and these eateries have been shut, and we don't have those people visiting these areas to go and dine out and to eat and to experience these places. So that could be part of it. But I do really believe, and people say it, and it's not a cliche. Food brings people together, of all race, creed, and culture and colour. I fear that the longer that restaurants are kind of made to look like the monsters of this pandemic or the spreaders of this thing, the longer we're going to hurt. Especially when we were just starting to build confidence of diners and they were coming out again in their droves. That I can see now just from my own restaurant that people are losing confidence And that's just from I don't just take a cancellation. I like to call them and find out why. Is it something we've done? Is it something that's maybe spreading through social media about a place or an area? But mostly it's just been people just being scared to go out, especially group bookings. When we've got a group of 8, 10, 12, well, we can't have 12s at the moment, but when couples start to drop off on those groups, it starts to make other couples nervous, and discussions start, and maybe just cancel, we'll do it again another day. For many of the restaurants, and maybe even me, there might not be another day. That's the reality that we've come to face.
Well, let's assume that there is another day, and I'm sure that there will be. And just the very idea of jumping on a plane with my carry-on and coming to a restaurant in Sydney seems absolutely outlandish, but also incredibly exciting and wonderful. So when I come, what are you going to feed me?
Well, it depends on when what the season is. I mean, Pazar has always been about the lamb. That's been our number one dish. The restaurant was built around it. The big wood fire oven was built specifically for doing the lamb, and it's a style of lamb done in Turkey. It's called a fırın kebab, which just translates to oven meat, because kebab in Turkey is generally just meat. It's not meat on a stick always. But, our slow roasted smoked lamb that goes in fresh in the morning every day and sits in there for about 6 to 8 hours, depending. That's our number one star dish. It's still our biggest seller. The smoked labna, I could never take off the menu. We go through, we're still selling really well, about 40 to 60 to 70 kilos of that a week, depending on how busy we are. That's a cold smoked labna that we do with a apricot mostarda at the moment.
Stop it!
But
it sounds so good.
Yeah, thanks. We've got there's probably 6 or 7 dishes that will never come off the Pazar menu just because people would riot and get really upset. But yeah, depending on the season, we've got a very short menu. It's only generally 14 items on there, and we rotate through and put some specials on depending on what's going on. But very much looking forward to the warmer weather. Yeah,
well, I'm really looking forward to being out the other side of everything and coming up there for some oven meat. So, Attila, in the meantime, I wish you all the best for getting through, staying sane, happy, eating delicious things and feeding your community. Thanks so much for being part of the conversation on Dirty Linen.
Thanks, Dani, and thanks, Rob.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtyLinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.